Hello and welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Paul Shikatano. Joining us by telephone from Washington, D.C. is Pete Hoekstra, the former chairman of the powerful House Intelligence Committee, who attended today's explosive hearing on Benghazi. Congressman Hoekstra, welcome to Newsmax TV.
Hey, thank you. Good to be with you.
Well, you predicted today's hearing would raise people's eyebrows and whet America's appetite for more information. Was that the case?
I think so. I mean, there were parts of the hearing today that I thought were very, very compelling. Number one, the witnesses. I'm very familiar with whistleblowers. They're taking a huge risk politically. They're risking their careers. They're going to Congress. They've tried to go through their superiors. They've tried to go through their agencies to let their voices be heard. They feel that they've been rebuffed. And any time you get whistleblowers going to Capitol Hill, that's going to raise some eyebrows. And I think there were two elements of the testimony that really caught my attention. One was when the chief of mission in Libya, Mr. Hicks, said, I had a congressman coming to Libya. He was there on a fact-finding mission, and I was instructed by Washington, not to give him any information, not to talk to him. Mr. Hicks did the right thing. He talked to Congressman Chavez. He answered all of his questions and those types of things. But you really have to ask the question as to, why would the State Department be telling, the chargé in Libya not to talk with Congress? That's an interesting question.
So did the testimony, in your opinion, show that the Obama administration is guilty of a cover-up with respect to the events of September 11th, 2012?
Well, again, this is part of the puzzle that came out today. It is now, the responsibility of the Oversight Committee to put together the rest of the pieces, all right? I don't think you can take one hearing and say it's a cover-up. You can say there's a lot of information here that really requires us to do a more in-depth analysis. You need to remember that Mr. Hicks now has come back from Libya and has, as he said, he's been demoted. And why would you demote someone who, in the immediate aftermath of Libya, his actions were described as being heroic, exemplary, and now that he didn't follow their instructions, he's been demoted, and so this hearing raises more questions than it answers. And Congressman Issa had a responsibility to listen to these whistleblowers. They did. They now need to go back and get more information to find out exactly what happened.
Well, who is ultimately responsible for the inability of the U.S. government to protect Ambassador Stevens and the three other Americans who perished at Benghazi?
Well, I think, ultimately the responsibility, falls, it is the Secretary of State to make sure that they've put in place the appropriate security measures to keep Americans safe. And, that gets to be a collaborative effort by the diplomatic security forces within State Department, but also with the U.S. military and these kinds of things. I thought another thing that was very interesting in the testimony today was that, some on the committee kept bringing up that, General Dempsey said it would take 20 hours before they could get a fixed-wing fighter aircraft over Libya. Leon Panetta was quoted as saying it would take 12 to 14 hours, and you're sitting there and thinking, let's see, it's about an hour, hour and a half flight across the Med from Italy, where we've got a major Air Force base, and just shortly after, a few months after we've had military operations, flying planes regularly over Libya, it now would take 20 hours to get a few fixed-wing jet fighters over Benghazi, which is an hour and there's something wrong with this process. And I'm thankful the whistleblowers came up. I'm thankful that Congressman Issa fulfilled his responsibility to whistleblowers and had the hearing.
Well, how big of a role did the presidential election play in the administration's attempt to play down the fact that a terrorist strike had taken place?
Well, that's, I think, the information that Daryl and the committee is going to have to start peeling back and getting the information. Interesting, the kinds of questions that you're asking me, are exactly the kinds of questions that the committee needs to answer, and before they reach any conclusions on that, they've got to get more information, and they need an administration that is willing to have a dialogue with Congress and get them this information. Right now, the Obama administration hasn't been willing to give them the information they need.
And what about Susan Rice? Did the testimony deal with whether she was a victim of the administration's attempt to downplay Benghazi, or was she a willing participant?
Well, again, it didn't give us any conclusive evidence on that today. I think what we did hear today is that from the people who were in Libya, who were in Benghazi, they didn't believe that this video had any, it had no impact on the attack. They felt it was a planned terrorist attack from the beginning. They never said that their superiors or anybody who asked from Washington that the video was a part of the activities and the attacks on that day. They said pure and simple, this was a terrorist attack from the beginning. It's what the ambassador described it as. He described it as an attack. This was not a spontaneous uprising because of some video. So the real question is, if that's what the people on the ground in Libya thought, how did that story evolve from what the people in Libya believed and what their observations were to what Susan Rice said on the Sunday morning talk shows? And the witnesses today obviously don't know what happened to their information and how their views were changed into what they heard on the Sunday morning talk shows. But again, they were stunned when they heard what Susan Rice said. But someone else is going to, at some other time, we're going to find out exactly how those talking points were developed and evolved to the point where these witnesses would say it didn't even closely match reality as to what happened on the ground.
Well, finally, Congressman, is it any clearer what steps the U.S. can take to make sure such a tragedy is never repeated in the future?
Not at this point. Okay, again, you got one piece of the puzzle. I think what the assessment today, and again, this is from these witnesses. They have questions about why the security footprint in Libya was so dramatically scaled back. And those kinds of questions. But again, we need to talk to the decision makers as to why those decisions were made. These were the people that were feeling the results of decisions that were made in Washington. They disagreed with some of those assessments, but they don't necessarily know what the decision-making process was for that.
Our guest today was Pete Hoekstra, former chairman of the powerful House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, as always, thank you for joining us on Newsmax TV, and thank you for watching.